The crystalline towers of Valdris Prime caught the light of 3 setting suns, casting rainbow fractals across the palace courtyard where Queen Seraphina stood in perfect stillness. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent quality that marked her as pure ethereal, pale blue-white with veins of silver that pulsed gently with her heartbeat. Her hair cascaded like liquid starlight down her back, and her eyes held the deep violet of nebulae. She was beautiful in the way that distant stars are beautiful, magnificent, untouchable, and cold. Darius Thorn knelt among the other servants at the courtyard's edge, his rough human hands folded respectfully as he watched the lunar convergence ceremony unfold. 3 years he'd served in this palace of living crystal and singing light, 3 years since the ships had taken him from the ruins of Terra Colony 7. Unlike the other human servants who carried themselves with broken resignation, Darius maintained a quiet dignity that hadn't escaped the Queen's notice, though she'd never acknowledged it. The ceremony was reaching its crescendo. Queen Seraphina raised her arms toward the 3 moons hanging like pearls in the darkening sky, her voice resonating with harmonic frequencies that made the crystal walls sing in response. Around her, the ethereal nobles stood in perfect formation, their forms draped in robes that seemed woven from captured aurora. By the light of the ancient moons, Seraphina intoned, her voice carrying across the vast courtyard, "We renew our bond with the eternal stars, we pledge our devotion to the cosmic order that has blessed our realm with." The plasma bolt screamed through the air like a comet of death. Darius saw it first, a streak of crimson fire launched from the shadows of the upper galleries. Time seemed to crystallize around him as his mind processed what his eyes couldn't quite believe. Assassins. Here. Now. Targeting her. The bolt was aimed directly at Seraphina's heart. Without thought, without hesitation, without regard for protocol or his own mortality, Darius launched himself forward. His feet pounded against the crystal floor as he sprinted past the frozen nobles, past the guards who were only now beginning to react, past every instinct that screamed at him to preserve his own life. The plasma bolt struck him in the chest with the force of a meteor. Fire exploded through his ribs, searing flesh and bone with temperatures that could melt steel. The impact spun him sideways, but somehow his feet kept moving, somehow his body stayed between the Queen and the second bolt that followed the first. This one caught his shoulder, spinning him again, painting the crystal floor with droplets of crimson that glowed like rubies in the moonlight. A third bolt. His thigh. The pain was beyond description, beyond endurance, but still he didn't fall. Still he stood between Seraphina and death, arms spread wide like a scarred shield of flesh and determination. The attack lasted 7 seconds. It felt like an eternity. When the last plasma bolt fizzled harmlessly against the crystal wall behind them, silence fell over the courtyard like a shroud. Every eye was fixed on the human servant who stood swaying but upright, his simple brown tunic charred and bloody, his face pale but set with iron resolve. Seraphina stared at him, her violet eyes wide with something she'd never felt before, genuine shock. In 3 centuries of life, through wars and political machinations and countless attempts on her power, no one had ever stepped between her and death without being ordered to do so. Not her guards, not her generals, not even her closest advisors. They would die for her crown, for her empire, for the power she represented. But this human, he had died for her. "Your Majesty," Darius said, his voice rough but steady as he turned his head slightly to meet her gaze. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, but he managed a small smile. "Are you unharmed?" She couldn't speak. The Queen who commanded star systems with a word, who could shatter mountains with her voice, found herself mute. There was something lodged in her throat, something warm and unfamiliar that she couldn't identify. The spell broke as Darius's knees buckled. Seraphina moved without thinking, catching him before he could fall, her arms encircling his battered form. Her royal robes, worth more than most planets' annual revenue, darkened with his blood, but she didn't care. All she could focus on was the weight of him against her, the stubborn rhythm of his heart still beating against his ribs. "You fool," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "You beautiful, impossible fool. Why?" Darius's eyes were growing glassy, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision, but he fought to focus on her face. Couldn't let them hurt you, he murmured. Not while I could still stand. Around them, the court began to stir. Guards rushed to form a protective circle, their energy shields crackling to life. Nobles whispered in shocked tones about the unprecedented breach of security, the unthinkable audacity of the attack. But all of that seemed distant, muffled, as if it were happening in another world. Serafina knelt there in the center of it all, cradling a dying human against her chest, feeling something crack open inside her that had been sealed for centuries. She had ruled through fear, through power, through the calculated distance that kept her elevated above all other beings. But this man, this servant who owed her nothing, had shown her a kind of loyalty she'd never imagined possible. "Stay with me," she commanded, though her voice lacked its usual authority. It sounded almost pleading. "That's an order." Darius managed one last smile, his hand coming up to rest briefly against her cheek, leaving a small smear of blood on her perfect skin. "Yes, my queen," he whispered, and then the darkness took him. But he was still breathing. Still fighting. Even unconscious, even broken, his body refused to surrender. As the medical teams rushed forward with their healing crystals and bioregenerators, Serafina held him close and whispered words in the ancient ethereal tongue, not commands this time, but prayers to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. For the first time in her long life, Queen Serafina Valdris understood what it meant to be afraid of losing someone. Queen Serafina Valdris had never set foot in the servants' medical wing before. The crystalline corridors here were smaller, dimmer, without the grand luminescence that bathed the royal quarters. Yet for the past 3 days, she had haunted these halls like a specter, dismissing her retinue, ignoring her advisors' increasingly frantic requests for audiences, and spending every moment she could at the bedside of a dying human. The bioregeneration chamber hummed softly around Darius's still form, its amber light casting a warm glow over his features. The plasma burns that had nearly killed him were healing, but slowly, too slowly for Serafina's liking. She had commanded the finest healers in her realm to attend him, much to their barely concealed horror. An ethereal queen personally overseeing the care of a human servant was unprecedented, scandalous even. She didn't care. "The cellular reconstruction is proceeding within normal parameters, Your Majesty," reported Healer Vex, his tone carefully neutral despite the obvious discomfort radiating from his crystalline features. "Though I must note that human physiology responds differently to our treatments. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to continue as you are." Serafina cut him off, her voice carrying that harmonic edge that brooked no argument. "And ensure he has the finest care available. I will hold you personally responsible for his recovery." Vex bowed stiffly and withdrew, leaving the queen alone with her thoughts and the steady rhythm of Darius's breathing. She settled into the chair beside his bed, a chair she had ordered brought from her own chambers when the medical wing's simple furnishings proved inadequate for her long vigils. As she watched him sleep, Serafina found herself studying the details she'd never noticed before. The way his dark hair curled slightly at the edges, still tousled from the chaos of the attack. The strength in his jaw, even in unconsciousness. The scars on his hands that spoke of a life lived with purpose, with labor, with meaning beyond the hollow pageantry of court. He was so different from the perfectly sculpted ethereal nobles who surrounded her daily, he was real in a way that made her feel more real too. On the second day, he had begun to stir. Fever dreams made him mutter words in languages she didn't recognize, fragments of memories that painted pictures of a life before the palace. She heard him speak a name, Elena, with such tenderness that something sharp twisted in her chest. When she asked the medical staff to research the name, they found records of Elena Blackwood, a human engineer who had died in the bombardment of Terra Colony 7. His lost love. The reason for the deep sadness she sometimes glimpsed behind his quiet strength. "You called for someone," Serafina said softly on the third evening, when Darius's eyes finally fluttered open with genuine awareness. "Elena. She was important to you." Darius turned his head slowly, surprise flickering across his features at finding the queen herself sitting beside his bed. He tried to sit up, but she gestured for him to remain still. She was everything, he admitted, his voice still rough from disuse. We were to be married when the war ended. She believed we could build something beautiful from the ashes, that love could triumph over destruction. His eyes grew distant. She was wrong, but she was beautiful in her wrongness. Serafina felt an unexpected pang of something that might have been jealousy, followed immediately by shame. What right did she have to feel possessive of this man's heart? She was his queen, not his anything. Tell me about her, she said instead, surprising them both with the request. So he did. As the days passed and his strength slowly returned, Darius painted word pictures of Elena Blackwood, brilliant, passionate, determined to see hope where others saw only darkness. She had designed water purification systems for refugee camps, had laughed at his terrible jokes, had danced with him in the ruins of bombed-out cities while dreaming of a future they would never share. She would have liked you, Darius said one evening, catching Serafina off guard. Elena always believed that power should be used to protect, not to dominate. She would have seen past the crown to the woman beneath. You presume to know what lies beneath my crown, Serafina replied, but there was no anger in her voice. Only curiosity. I see someone who sits by the bedside of a servant she barely knows, Darius said simply. Someone who risks scandal to ensure that servant receives proper care. Someone who asks about his lost love instead of demanding his gratitude. That tells me everything I need to know about what lies beneath your crown. The observation unsettled her more than she cared to admit. For 3 centuries, she had cultivated distance, had wrapped herself in the mystique of absolute power. Yet this human saw through all of that as if it were mere gossamer. Why do you serve me? She asked suddenly. Your world was conquered, your people enslaved. You have every reason to hate everything I represent. Darius was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the ceiling where bioluminescent patterns swirled like slow galaxies. At first, it was simple survival, he admitted. Serve or die, the choice was clear. But then. I watched you. I saw how you treated those who served faithfully, how you shouldered burdens that would break lesser beings. I saw the loneliness you try so hard to hide. I am not lonely, Serafina protested automatically. Everyone is lonely, Your Majesty. Some of us are just better at pretending otherwise. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth. Serafina had ruled for 3 centuries, had commanded the loyalty of billions, had shaped the destiny of star systems. But she had done it all alone, wrapped in the isolation that came with absolute power. She had convinced herself that solitude was strength, that emotional distance was necessary for effective rule. But sitting here with Darius, sharing stories and comfortable silences, she began to remember what it felt like to simply be Serafina rather than Queen Serafina Valdris, sovereign of the ethereal dominion, keeper of the crystal throne. I dream of stars sometimes, she found herself saying, the words escaping before she could stop them. Not the ones we rule or conquer, but wild stars, free stars that belong to no empire. I dream of walking among them without ceremony or protocol, without the weight of a crown. She paused, startled by her own admission. I have never told anyone that before. Your secret is safe with me, Darius promised, and something in his tone made her believe him absolutely. As the week progressed, their conversations grew deeper, more intimate. She told him about the pressure of inherited power, about the expectations that had shaped her from birth, about the terrible weight of making decisions that affected the lives of billions. He shared stories of life before the conquest, of simple pleasures and human connections that her royal existence had never allowed. In my village, we had a tradition, Darius said one evening as twin moons rose beyond the medical wing's crystal windows. Every harvest season, we would dance around bonfires until dawn, celebrating the abundance of the earth and the bonds between us. Rich or poor, young or old, none of that mattered when the music played. We were just people, grateful to be alive and together. It sounds wonderful, Seraphina said wistfully. I have attended 10,000 ceremonies, but I have never danced for joy. Perhaps someday, Darius said, his eyes meeting hers with gentle warmth, when this is all over, you could try. The suggestion was innocent enough, but something in the way he said it made her heart race in a rhythm that had nothing to do with her royal bearing. She found herself imagining it, dancing without ceremony or protocol, simply moving to music for the pure joy of it. Dancing with him. The thought should have been scandalous. A queen and a servant, an ethereal and a human, the very concept violated every social convention of her civilization. Yet as she looked into Darius's eyes, she felt something awakening within her that had nothing to do with duty or power or the careful calculations of rule. She felt alive. Darius, she began, but the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor made her fall silent. The spell of intimacy broke as reality reasserted itself. She was a queen, he was her subject, and the world beyond this small room would never understand or accept what was growing between them. But as the healer entered to check on Darius's progress, Seraphina made a silent promise to herself. Whatever was happening here, whatever these feelings meant, she would not let fear or convention destroy it before she had a chance to understand it. For the first time in her long life, Queen Seraphina Valdris was learning the difference between ruling hearts and losing her own. Kira Nightshade moved through the palace shadows like liquid darkness itself. Her form was tall and lithe, her skin the deep purple-black of midnight skies, marked with the intricate silver tattoos that designated her rank as the queen's most trusted operative. Her eyes were solid black orbs that missed nothing, and her fingers ended in retractable claws that could slice through steel. She was death given form, loyalty given purpose, and she had served Queen Seraphina without question for 50 years. Until now. The intelligence she'd gathered over the past week sat heavy in her mind like poison. High Chancellor Vorthan and 3 other members of the Inner Council were planning to eliminate the human servant who had so captured their queen's attention. Not through official channels, that would be too obvious, too traceable. Instead, they intended to arrange an accident during his transfer back to the servants' quarters, making it appear as though complications from his injuries had claimed his life. Kira crouched in the ventilation shaft above the Chancellor's private chamber, her enhanced hearing picking up every word of their treasonous planning. The Queen's infatuation with this human grows more dangerous by the day, Vorthan hissed, his crystalline features twisted with disgust. She spends hours at his bedside, ignores state business, dismisses audiences with foreign dignitaries. The other realms are beginning to question her stability. More than that, added Counselor Thex, her voice sharp with ambition, she's begun speaking of policy reforms, of reconsidering our treatment of conquered peoples. This human is poisoning her mind against the natural order. Kira's claws extended involuntarily. She had watched the changes in her queen too, but unlike these fools, she recognized them for what they truly were, not weakness, but awakening. For the first time in centuries, Seraphina seemed truly alive, truly herself rather than merely the mask she wore for the throne. The human dies tomorrow, Vorthan declared with finality. During the medical transport. A tragic relapse, a sudden failure of his alien physiology to adapt to our healing methods. Regrettable, but inevitable. The other conspirators murmured their agreement, and Kira had heard enough. She slipped away through the ventilation system like a wraith, her mind racing with impossible choices. Her duty was to the crown, to the stability of the realm. But her loyalty, her true loyalty, was to the woman beneath the crown, the woman who had shown her kindness when others saw only a weapon. And that woman was falling in love with a human who would be dead by sunset tomorrow. Kira materialized in the medical wing like smoke given form, startling Darius who was attempting to take his first tentative steps around his chamber. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall, and she was impressed despite herself by his determination to recover quickly. "You're the Queen's assassin," he said, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Kira Nightshade. I've heard the servants whisper about you." "Among other things," she replied, studying him with those unsettling black eyes. "Tell me, human, do you love her?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. What? My queen. Do you love her, or is this some elaborate manipulation? Some plot by human resistance forces to corrupt her from within? Darius met her gaze steadily, despite the predatory intensity radiating from her form. I would die for her. I already nearly did. That's not what I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with feelings he'd barely admitted to himself. Yes, he said finally, the word carrying the weight of absolute truth. I love her. Not the crown, not the power, not what she represents, her. Seraphina. The woman who sits by my bedside and shares stories of dancing under wild stars. Kira nodded slowly. She was an expert at reading deception, and she found none in his words. Then you need to know that you're going to die tomorrow. The High Chancellor and his conspirators have arranged for your medical complications during transport back to the servants' quarters. The blood drained from Darius's face, but not from fear for himself. Seraphina, if they're willing to kill me to influence her, she's in danger too. Eventually, yes. Once you're removed, they'll work to isolate her completely, to return her to the controllable puppet she was before you awaken something real in her. Kira's claws extended partially, glinting in the chamber's soft light. I won't allow that to happen. What are you saying? I'm saying that 50 years of loyal service to the crown ends tonight. I choose her happiness over political stability, her heart over the realm's traditions. Kira moved to the window, scanning the palace grounds with tactical precision. We have perhaps 4 hours before the night shift changes. Can you travel? I can do whatever is necessary, Darius replied without hesitation. Kira's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Good. Because we're about to commit treason together. They moved through the palace like ghosts, Kira's knowledge of every secret passage and hidden route guiding them past patrols and surveillance systems. Darius followed despite the pain that still lanced through his healing wounds, driven by something stronger than physical discomfort, the need to protect the woman who had opened her heart to him. They found Seraphina in her private garden, a crystalline sanctuary where bioluminescent flowers bloomed in impossible colors. She was sitting beside a fountain of liquid light, her expression distant and melancholy. When she saw them approaching together, confusion flickered across her features. Kira. Darius, you should be resting. We need to leave, Kira interrupted, her voice urgent. Now. The High Chancellor plans to kill Darius tomorrow and frame it as medical complications. This is just the beginning, they mean to control you completely. Seraphina rose slowly, her form seeming to gather light as her anger grew. They dare. They see your attachment to him as weakness, Kira explained. They're not entirely wrong. Love does make us vulnerable. But it also makes us strong in ways that pure power never can. The Queen's gaze moved between her most trusted assassin and the human who had captured her heart. You're asking me to abandon my throne, my people, my entire realm. I'm asking you to save yourself, Kira replied. And him. And maybe, eventually, find a way to change things from a position of strength rather than isolation. Seraphina looked at Darius, seeing the quiet determination in his eyes, the willingness to face whatever came as long as they faced it together. In that moment, she realized that she had already made her choice days ago, sitting by his bedside and discovering what it meant to care for someone more than she cared for power. Where would we go? The Crystal Caverns, Kira said. Ancient tunnels that run beneath the palace, forgotten by most but still accessible. We can hide there while I arrange more permanent sanctuary. The escape was harrowing. Alarms began to sound as they descended into the caverns, whether from their disappearance being discovered or the coup attempt beginning early, none of them could say. The tunnels were a maze of glowing formations and underground rivers, beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Darius stumbled several times, his strength not yet fully returned, but each time Seraphina was there to steady him. Her touch sent warmth through both of them that had nothing to do with her natural bioluminescence. In the depths of the earth, far from throne rooms and protocol, they were simply two beings who had found something precious in each other. "There," Kira said finally, leading them into a vast underground chamber where crystal formations created natural walls and alcoves. "We should be safe here for now. The caverns extend for miles, even if they send search parties, it would take weeks to explore them all." As they settled into their makeshift refuge, Serafina found herself truly alone with Darius for the first time since his recovery began. The constant presence of healers and guards was gone, replaced by the intimate shelter of crystalline walls and the soft glow of luminescent moss. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "Don't," Darius interrupted gently, reaching out to take her hand. "Don't apologize for the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me." Their eyes met in the soft light, and suddenly the distance between them seemed impossible to maintain. 3 centuries of royal isolation, of emotional barriers and calculated responses, crumbled in the face of something far more powerful than duty or tradition. "Darius," she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. "I know," he replied, understanding without need for words. "I feel it too." When their lips met, it was with the desperate tenderness of two souls who had found their missing piece. Her skin glowed brighter under his touch, patterns of light cascading across her form like aurora made manifest. His hands tangled in her starlight hair as he pulled her closer, marveling at the way she fit against him as if they had been designed for this moment. Kira, keeping watch at the chamber entrance, allowed herself a small smile. She had served the crown faithfully for 50 years, but she had never seen her queen truly happy until now. Some things were worth betraying the world for. In the depths of the crystal caverns, as rebellion raged above and uncertain futures stretched ahead, Queen Serafina Valdris learned that love was indeed stronger than empires. And in Darius Thorne's arms, she discovered that some crowns were worth abandoning for the chance to finally, truly, live.